Saw dudes. Today's Stasis Titan build was suggested by a viewer, NeoCypher790. Thank you for the idea and for letting me build upon it more. We're going to be making a ton of stasis crystals with the help of Armamentarium, an exotic that's been left behind in favor of others like Heart of Inmost Light and Hoarfrost Z. The idea of the build is to create and shatter Stasis Shards to fuel an endless cycle of Howl of the Storm melees. This provides great cover and AoE damage that can clear rooms easily. As an added bonus, you get to cosplay as Walter White and make tons of blue rock candy. With that out of the way, let's get started. Glacial Quake is the only choice we have for a super, but it fits in nicely with the crystal theme of the build. The barricade is entirely up to preference, but since we will be putting ourselves very close to enemies, I opted to use Towering Barricade for extra security. Shiver Strike is in the same situation as Glacial Quake, as it is our only choice. Glacier Grenade is mandatory for this build. It provides great cover, instantly freezes enemies, and can be shattered for additional damage. The aspects of the Heisenberg build are Howl of the Storm and Tectonic Harvest. Howl of the Storm allows us to perform a sliding melee attack, which creates 4 stasis crystals in a line, 1 small, 2 medium, and 1 large. Tectonic Harvest allows us to generate stasis shards upon breaking stasis crystals, refunding melee energy when picked up. These shards can also be picked up by allies and give more ability uptime to the whole fire team. For the fragments, I went with Whisper of Chains, Conduction, Fissures, and Shards. Chains grants a 40% damage resistance buff when standing near a frozen enemy or stasis crystal. Conduction makes stasis shards within 15 meters track to us and give an additional 10 resilience and 10 intellect. Fissures increases the damage and range of bursts when shattering crystals or combatants. And finally, Whisper of Shards grants a 500% increased grenade regeneration rate after shattering a crystal. Let's go over the Walter White outfit. Starting with the helmet, I use Solar Siphon, Special Ammo Finder, and Ashes to Assets. Ashes to Assets can be swapped to Heavy Ammo Finder if you want. With the gauntlets, I slotted Grenade Kickstart, Impact Induction, and Momentum Transfer. On Armamentarium, I ran Charged Up, Harmonic Reserves, and a Variable Resistance mod. On the Hazmat Suit Boots, I ran Harmonic Scavenger, Elemental Charge, and Recuperation. Last but not least, on the mark were Outreach, Bomber, and Reaper. This build is about getting up close and personal with enemies, so 100 resilience is required. Since the ability loop calls for grenade and melee energy, try to focus the rest of your stat points into discipline and strength. Let's cover our lab tools for the rock candy. Weapon Loadout 1 is my personal favorite since it makes me feel like Doom God. If you haven't guessed it already, we're rocking Conditional Finality in the kinetic slot. Its first shot can freeze enemies, which can proc the damage resistance buff provided by Whisper of Chains. The second shot can cause an ignition, adding to our overall AoE damage and causing nearby crystals to shatter. In the energy slot, I use Tyranny of Heaven for the long range damage that it provides. It can roll with a combination of Dragonfly and Incandescent for insane explosion potential. Paired with a Glacier Grenade, chunky majors couldn't be more flashy. In the heavy slot, I am once again using Cold Comfort. It can roll with Bait and Switch for DPS, and it lines up with the Scavenger mod that's being used. Weapon Loadout 2 puts more focus on mid-range skirmishing and AoE damage. In the kinetic slot, I opted to use a distant pull for the triple tap and headstone combo. While we will be playing from a longer range, creating rock candy is important for the activation of Whisper of Shards for constant grenade uptime. Again, I am using Tyranny of Heaven in the energy slot for the same reasons I had before. When we look at the heavy slot though, it starts to get interesting. I use Salvation's Grip to create a ridiculous amount of stasis crystals. When we combine the sheer number of crystals we create with Whisper of Fissures, we can do great AoE damage. Weapon Loadout 3 is also focused on creating crystals. This time, we're going to use Vergalass Curve in the kinetic slot. This season, it works consistently with Whisper of Fissures, so now creating rock candy couldn't be easier. In the energy slot, I use Forbearance for Ad Clear. Additionally, Forbearance can be used to shatter stasis crystals easily. In the heavy slot, I'm using Hothead for reliable boss DPS. I would try this loadout if you like Vergalass Curve a lot. Since the fix, this has become a new favorite of mine. Now, I'll give you an outline of the gameplay loop. Start by using your Howl of the Storm melee and throwing down a Glacier Grenade. Stay next to them for the damage resist provided by Whisper of Chains. When enemies are close, shatter the crystals for damage and to proc Whisper of Shards, then collect the shards that are created for melee regen. With all the shattered crystals, your melee and grenade should be nearly charged. While using your abilities, weave in shots of your special weapon to beefy targets, and you'll be set. I'm very glad to have made a build inspired by a viewer of mine. It was a blast to make, and I look forward to making more. Thank you guys for watching, and happy farming. Enjoy the new season.